So I've talked about a few other quarterbacks so far, but the moment in time has come for me to talk about the guy who I have graded as the number one quarterback prospect in the 2017 NFL Draft, and that is Patrick Mahomes II from Texas Tech. Now, it's not by a wide margin. It's not by a big gaping void between him and everybody else, that's for sure. In fact, his grading is pretty close in line with DeShone Kizer's. But in terms of pure upside and pure talent, I think Patrick Mahomes II has the most of it of anybody in this draft class. When you look at his resume, he was a 2-year starter at Texas Tech, and what was impressive about it is he ended up beating out Davis Webb and forcing Davis Webb to ultimately end up at Cal, a guy that some people like as a kind of under the radar prospect in this draft class. Patrick Mahomes ended up ultimately unseating him for that job, and in his 2 years as a starter, he threw for over 11,000 passing yards, 93 touchdowns, 29 interceptions. Mind you, when you factor in some spot duty in 2014 as well. But when I look at the body of work, you're talking about the son of former Major League reliever Pat Mahomes. You can see that in part. You see sometimes a baseball player, similar to how you did early in his career with Jameis Winston. Now, granted, that could lead to some bad habits, just like it did with Jameis Winston, but there's a lot to work with here. First, I talk about biggest strengths. I talk about his size. 6'3" and a half, pushing 6'4" is what he looks like. Got plenty of bulk on his frame. So I think he's a guy that could definitely handle the rigors of a 16-game NFL season. Got a hose for an arm. You could tell this was a kid who used to throw 93 or so with his fastball as a relief pitcher in college. He's got the hose. He's got that hose that can make all the required NFL throws and make them with zip and velocity and force. He can fit the ball into tight windows that not too many other guys can fit the ball into. So you talk about size and arm strength. He's got both of them. He's got that athleticism that you'll love. This is a guy that can keep plays alive with his feet. This is a guy that can scramble. This is a guy that can run with the ball. This is a guy that you can run zone read with. You can do read option with. You can structure plays for him to run, options out of the bootleg. You can do all types of things with him because of the athleticism. So in terms of that modern dual threat type of quarterback prototype, Mahomes fits into that category. He's not the prototype of it, but he fits into that prototype. So he's a guy with a strong arm, very good athleticism, and also demonstrated to me an ability to see the field at Texas Tech. Now, there are always questions about the Texas Tech type of system in terms of whether or not that can really translate to NFL success, and talking about this and talking about that. But I actually think this guy demonstrated the ability to go through his progressions, to actually move the safeties and defenders with his eyes better than most of the other prospects in this draft class. And that's another trait that I'm really big on. So where people could talk about, Texas Tech, it's one read and throw, I don't think that's entirely accurate, especially when it comes to Mahomes. I really don't. If you talked about Baker Mayfield in Oklahoma, for example, that's a perfect example of Sam Bradford, Landry Jones, Baker Mayfield. These are all one-read guys. Literally, wherever the play is designed to go is exactly where it goes. There's no flexibility within the system to go through different progressions or anything like that. Mahomes showed the ability to me to be able to go through his reads, go through his progressions, and I really like that, outside of just the physical package. Now, he is far from a finished product, I will grant you. And it's very easy to fall in love with some of the physical tools and say, hey, this guy has it, he's going to get there. But the fact is, there's a long way for him to go. In terms of his biggest question marks to me, number one, mechanics. He needs work there. He needs significant work. He's got a long throwing motion. Sometimes he'll throw the ball almost sidearmed. You could see the baseball influences on his throwing motion, similar to how you could with Jameis Winston at Florida State when he was still pitching in baseball. You could see where the throwing motion got a little long. Sometimes his arm slot wasn't consistent. That's what you see with Mahomes. You could sometimes do a better job of utilizing his lower body in his throwing motion. Sometimes he tries to get by too much just on pure arm strength alone. He's going to need an overhaul to his mechanics. There's just no way about it. They don't have to be perfect because the arm talent can compensate for less than perfect mechanics, but they've got to be better than the borderline terrible they are right now. It's that simple. Now, I did talk about I felt he had the size to hold up to the rigors of a 16-game NFL season, but this is a guy that did have some nagging injuries. It would seem like something small would always pop up, whether it's a shoulder injury, or this injury, or that injury, a concussion, whatever the case might be. Just a wide variety of different injuries that he would have to battle throughout the week, or potentially cause him to not finish a game. It's something that is a little bit concerning for the NFL level because the guys only get bigger, stronger, faster, and hit harder. So while if he was like strictly a statue in the pocket, I'd be incredibly concerned about it. I still have some concerns, especially because this is a guy that does run with the ball and sometimes doesn't demonstrate a great ability to me to understand when to hook slide, when to cut your losses and say, I've gained enough, let's move on to the next play. You can take big hits at the NFL level trying to extend plays, trying to get first downs with his feet. So that is a major concern. And his number one concern, though, I think mechanics are something you could improve and work on. I think durability, you could do some things to help that along. But frankly, a lot of guys just play hurt consistently at the NFL level anyways. It's something to deal with. And frankly, Mahomes didn't miss games because of injury. He had the ability of availability. But his decision-making needs serious work. And sometimes guys can get better in their decision-making, and sometimes they can't. When you think of gunslingers, I know John Gruden likes to call everybody a gunslinger that plays the quarterback position on Monday night. But Patrick Mahomes II, when you watch him, he is a gunslinger. This is a guy that takes some big chances with the ball. And when they pay off extremely well. But when they don't, ooh, baby, they just do not at all. He shows a tendency to hold on to the ball too long at times, tries to make too much happen with his feet, tries to make too much happen with his arm. You'll sometimes see where he'll throw the ball into double or even triple coverage. And granted, he sometimes has the arm talent to do that, but you're also talking about doing that in the Big 12 where the defenses are extremely lacking. How is that going to translate to the NFL level? He definitely needs work just because he didn't have a ton of interceptions. I mean, you're talking about over a 3-year career, 2 years as a starter with some spot duty as a freshman in 2014. He still threw 29 interceptions. Granted, part of that is the volume with which they threw in that passing attack. But you have other quarterback prospects that throw a lot too that don't have nearly the turnover problems that Patrick Mahomes did. His decision making is going to have to get better. He's going to have to learn how to protect the football. He's going to have to learn when to take calculated risk and gambles and when to take just what the defense allows him, affords him, and gives him. Because if he doesn't, he's always going to find himself in the doghouse of his head coach at the NFL level, and he's always going to be this close to getting the rug yanked out from under him. So he's got to work on those mechanics, but more importantly than not, he's got to work on his decision making. He must. And also a question mark too is ultimately playing in that Texas Tech system. Is this a guy whose natural talents will translate to the NFL level and bode well for his NFL success? Or did he play in a system that was very wide open, play in a crappy defensive league in the Big 12 that allowed him to put up these huge numbers and artificially inflates him to look a whole lot better than he actually is? That's a significant question because guys that play in the Texas Tech type of system really haven't translated well to the NFL level. I think he has more of the natural talent and tools to succeed and translate than some of the other guys did over the years, but it's still a concern. Even though NFL teams more and more, as you watch NFL game, they're running college type of offenses, let's be honest. So I don't think this is as big of a concern as it was 5, 7, or 10 years ago, but he is going to have to learn how to play under center. He's going to have to learn how to make adjustments before the snap. Even though you occasionally saw that at Texas Tech, you didn't see it on a consistent basis, pre-snap reads, audibles, things like that. A lot of that was still dictated by the sideline, which I'm not a huge fan of because at the end of the day, even though they're coaches and coordinators and they can see the field, nobody has a better feel or understanding for what's going on in the game than the actual players. And I think part of the flaw in today's coaching in general is the fact that it's too micromanaged. There's too much control over the quarterback. You think back to the old days, the head coach and the offensive coordinator would come up with a series of plays or come up with an idea or philosophy of what they wanted done, but it was ultimately up to the quarterback to make the play calls. You think about Johnny Unitas and Joe Namath and those type of guys, Dan Fouts. They would still ultimately be the play caller. They just got ideas and stuff from the sidelines, from the coach's booth. And I wish we got back to that a little bit more. So we'll have to see how he goes into a situation where he's going to be micromanaged, but yet at the same time, he's going to have to do more on his own. He's going to have to make those adjustments pre-snap. He's going to have to audible. He's going to have to change protections. He's going to have to change routes. He's going to have to change all of that. How will he do? In terms of an NFL comparison, I know I've mentioned Jameis Winston's name a couple of times, but that more so comes into the comparison in terms of uh, the throwing mechanics being affected by being a baseball player, pitcher, and decision making. Um, but that's really where the comparison stops. I think the best pure comparison I could come up with for Patrick Mahomes in terms of quarterbacks in the NFL, honestly, was Matthew Stafford, and here's why. He's a little bit bigger than Stafford, mind you, but both guys with really, really good arms, with borderline elite arm talent, uh, the athleticism to keep plays alive, especially in Stafford's case. I think that's a very underrated trait of him, and frankly, has been an underutilized portion of his time and his abilities in Detroit. Um, Arm strength, ability to extend plays, but also sometimes flaws with mechanics. You know, even Stafford still to this day. Yeah, now the narrative has changed somewhat where they talk about his ability to throw off balance and off of many different arm angles. And sometimes that works, and sometimes he's got the arm to compensate for that. But other times it leads to bad throws, inaccurate throws, and it leads to turnovers at the most inopportune of times. And that decision making aspect, the kind of gunslinging mentality that Matthew Stafford has, I see a lot of that in Mahomes. So when I look at the entirety of the body of work of Matthew Stafford in his career and Patrick Mahomes and trying to project him, I see a lot of Matthew Stafford. Now, granted, for an NFL team that would draft Mahomes, especially if they got him around number two, if he developed into a Matthew Stafford type of quarterback, then you've done really, really well for yourself in the draft. Um, but with that said, he has a long ways to go to get to that point. In terms of his final grade, he was my number one graded quarterback in this class, but even then, his final grade was still an 87.15. I still have him as a high to mid second round pick. He would be the guy that I would feel the most confident about trading back up into round one, taking a gamble on him as a quarterback of the future, but not by much. And I still don't view him as a first round talent, even when you factor in the 5% premium that I put on the quarterback position, because it is the most important position. If we went off of raw grading, you know, you're talking about a guy, for all intents and purposes, as a third round talent. There are major holes in his games, and he's going to need work. In terms of his best fits at the NFL level, you know, I look at a team like Chicago. I would love nothing more to see them be able to take somebody like a Jonathan Allen or Malik Hooker at 3 and be able to come out with a Mahomes and with their second round pick or trading back up into the tail end portion of round one. I'd feel really, really good about that draft. You know, but a Mahomes could be the type of guy that you get a team that falls in love with him and out of nowhere they take him in a surprising spot in the draft. He could rise. You could see a team like the Buffalo Bills potentially take him at number 10. You really could. Maybe the thought being is that they're stuck with Tyrod Taylor for now, but long term, Taylor's not the answer. They want somebody to groom, somebody to be ready. I look at the New York Giants. You want to be able to get the most out of Odell Beckham Jr. because he's your star, he's your franchise going forward for the next several years to come. Eli Manning is starting to fall off of the cliff in terms of his skills and his abilities. You want to be ready for 2 or 3 years where the time is right to transition away from Eli to the next generation of his position. Mahomes makes a lot of sense for the Giants at number 23, I do believe. And even the Cleveland Browns coming into round number 2, they've got 2 second-round picks. If they decide to take them with one of those 2 second-round picks, that's a bit of a coup to me because they've gotten the best quarterback in the draft. Or if they, again, decide they want to trade up into the tail end portion of round number 1, get that potential 5th year of team control on them, I think that makes a lot of sense. But in terms, again, of the quarterback position, this is not a great quarterback class. I think everybody understands that and acknowledges it. I don't think it's as bad as 2013's, which is the first comparison that people naturally go to. I think there's more natural talent and ability and upside here by far than there was with the class with EJ Manuel and Geno Smith and Mike Glennon and so on. But I understand some of the comparisons because there's not a guy that has the look of being a for sure franchise quarterback. The guy in this draft that I think has the best chance to potentially, and you might not see it instantly, he might not even play right away, is Patrick Mahomes the second. When you look at the size, the arm strength, the athleticism, the ability to see the field, I think this is the dude that if I wanted to start thinking about taking a quarterback the tail end portion of round 1 or early portion of round 2, he's the guy I want to gamble on. He's the guy that's most worth the risk. He's the guy I feel that has the most upside.